Hello, everyone. I am Liam, and I am here to talk about the Epiphany of the Lord from the reading that I had come out just on the 5th. Um, it is now time for the supplementary lecture. I just real quick, I like having my face over here on the left, not because I like seeing my face by any means. There's plenty of videos I have on the internet where you don't see my face, but mostly because of my experience with online learning. Um, this is how it's done. We have the slideshow taking up most of the space and then the face over here. So hopefully that doesn't bother really anyone. But anyways, that's just an aside. So let's get right into this first series homily. So just mention off the bat that this is Ælfric's first series homily on the Epiphany, not another homily on the Epiphany. Say it starts with Min tha leofoston rather than this die is Yahatin on Bokum, right, or anything like that, right? So this is the one it starts with. I just read it a couple days ago. I link to where you can read it as well, for the most part. But yeah, anyways, so it's the first series homily. I would like to get to some second series homilies or even some stuff from his saints' lives eventually. It's just as of right now, in the things I'm looking at doing, especially with time constraints, as I would like to do 2 a month, I'd definitely be getting the second series homilies. As it looks like I might just be stuck to doing 1 a month as I'm very busy, unfortunately. Then as of right now, the ones I have planned out looks like they're going to be first series homilies. So anyways, so the Epiphany is actually, well, I put here it's 12th day and Three Kings Day, and we're going to talk about that. But so 12th day actually is confusing, especially for the Anglo-Saxons and early England in general, we're not sure whether it's often considered the 5th of January or the 6th of January. If it is the 6th of January, Epiphany and 12th day line up, right? Epiphany is solidly always on the 6th, actually traditionally, because I think some sects of Christianity now celebrate on the Sunday. So this year it was on the 5th. But the name itself comes from the 12 days of Christmas, this 12th day, right? This would be the last day of Christmas. And so sometimes you'll have the 5th called, well, nothing really, I guess 12th Eve, right? Or something like that. Or 12th night. But we'll kind of talk about this in a second. Actually, the next slide is going to go over a quote from someone. But so again, that date depends on whether you count the 12 days beginning on December 25th or 26th. And so again, traditionally in England, it's called 12th day. It's not anymore. And it is sometimes called Three Kings Day. That's often what I hear it called here in the States. It is also known as Theophany. This seems to be more popular in the Eastern traditions, and it has other names as well. And again, the Three Kings Day is named after the Three Magi. Also, we have a detail here from the Chichester Constable Chasuble, which is from later medieval England, but this is something a priest would wear. So, anyways, and that depicts the Epiphany, of course. The Adoration of the Magi, whatever you want to call it. All right, so here's that quote I was talking about, actually. So I took this from Winters in the World by Eleanor Parker, who is a big inspiration for me when I do this project. Her blog is wonderful. I'll mention her almost certainly later here in this lecture as well. But here's what she says. Although these texts mark the beginning of the year on the 1st of January, there's little evidence of New Year celebrations in Anglo-Saxon England on this day. For most people, the date would have been subsumed into the longer period of festivity of the 12 days of Christmas, which culminated on the 5th of January, the eve of the Epiphany. This is now known as 12th night, but in the Anglo-Saxon period, it was 12th eve, 12th tan avon, preceding 12th day, 12th tan die, on the 6th January. So again, 12th day, 6th January. So 12th day was commonly used as another name for the Epiphany, and it's sometimes even called 12th Miss Day. All right. So pretty much all the stuff I said. But Miss Parker does it very well. Anyway, so we're going to take a detour actually through the runes, which seems a little off topic before we actually get to the meat of the slides. And that's mostly actually because in my thumbnail, I use this picture here, and I wanted to mention it here in the slides. So, and the reason being is because there's runes up here, Magi, so they say. And this is the Epiphany. This is on the Frank's casket, or the Auzon casket from the 8th century. Over here on the left, you'd actually have a scene of Wayland I think it's actually Isle, the brother of Wayland, if I remember correctly. I'm not looking at it, so I can't remember for sure. But anyways, so the runes in Anglo-Saxon England are not the same as the Elder Futhark. So the earliest versions of these runes are the Elder Futhark, and that is very similar. Well, that is an Iron Age alphabet, pretty much, right? Futhorc itself, though, has 28 to 34 characters, right? Compared with the 16 characters of younger Futhorc, or Futhark, rather. Elder Futhark, I think, has 24, if I'm remembering correctly. So you actually get less in younger Futhark when that develops there. You get more in the Anglo-Frisian runes, which are sometimes called Anglo-Saxon runes, but they're used in Frisia as well. So we have here again on the casket, we have Magi, Magi, or something like that, Magi. And then again, you have Moan, which is the name of the rune, means man. You have Ash, which means ash. You have Yevu, which means gift. And then, well, Is, which is ice. And so the Elder Futhark Mon here is actually, this figure is the same in Elder Futhark, and it is called what we call Manas, right? The Proto-Germanic word for man. It also has the same meaning, of course, right, as Mon. So we also have Ash again. The Elder Futhark figure is the same, though the name is Ansu's god. This rune evolved into 3 runes in Futhorc. We have Os, which retains this meaning god, and you have Ak, which is oak. You can see the differences here. And then you have the one that retains the shape, of course, and that's Ash, which we already went over. And then you have the Elder Futhark symbol here for this G, which would be palatalized in Old English, but it's Gabo in Proto-Germanic. Also has the same meaning, though, of gift. It would be Gabo, I guess, probably. Ooh. So anyways, and then we have Is again. So Elder Futhark is, again, the same, be Isaz, and also has the same meaning of ice. And this also is actually the only character that is exactly the same in Younger Futhark, which makes sense. Some of them are similar in Younger Futhark, but this just straight line looks like an eye. It is the same in the Younger Futhark as well. And here are some examples, actually. So the one on the right, the Ruthwell Cross, that's Anglo-Saxon. This is Sax of Bachnoth. That is also Anglo-Saxon. This is actually a rare example of runes being inscribed onto a blade. You can find them on swords normally, but they're normally not on the blade itself. And then this Westeremden Ustic, which is actually a Frisian example. Probably the most famous Frisian example. You can't really see the runes that well in this picture, but again, maybe you can't see the runes very well on the actual Ustic. Okay, and so I just want to talk about magic real quick, though, because we're talking about the Magi. And this quote actually brings it up, though this quote is in relation to a fantasy series. But anyways, it says, magic is notoriously difficult to define. Etymologically, we get the word from Greek mageia, which means the theology of the magoi, the dream-interpreting Persian priests said to have called on the infant Jesus. This suggests that as we examine the meaning of the word magic more deeply, we're going to find connections with the religious practice, spirituality, oracles, and things done by outsiders, as to say people other than ourselves. Which definitely gives you a sense of this word magic, and even the sense of the Magi, who are very much these foreign figures in this New Testament Epiphany story. And again, that's picture DJ Butler. Okay, so we have Matthew 2. So Luke 2, of course, is the main source for the Christmas story. It's very popular to read on Christmas Eve. And you have Matthew 2, which is the main source for the Epiphany story, which I just put main story for the Epiphany story, which I guess is fair and accurate, just doesn't sound right. Anyways, here, actually over here, is the Lindisfarne Gospels. This is the incipit for the Gospel of Matthew on the right. And then below that is the passage, the beginning of the passage quoted in Latin to begin it before he translates it into Old English by Ælfric. So, cum ergo natus. So, anyways, again from the Lindisfarne Gospels. So, and you get the different folios right here. If you want to go look those up yourselves, you can look these up. I just pulled these off the internet, found them myself, and took these screenshots. So, anyways, beautiful. The Lindisfarne Gospels are absolutely beautiful. They're written in Latin, so there's less use in some sense for a student of Old English, but not completely, as we'll actually come back to them. You can see these glosses here, and that is where you're going to get, like, you can even see the king for regis over here in the Latin. So anyways, now we're actually to the homily itself. Okay, so we have min tha leofostan, which, I meant to go in and actually set up my slides more, where this wouldn't all be available on the first click, and I'd have to click a lot more. But anyways, so this means min, most beloved people, right? Min just means people, if you remember from last time. Most beloved, in a sense, is literally lovest, like it's the superlative of leof, love, right? So it's lovest, min, lovest. So most beloved, right? Because leof is something you just call it. It means love, like you're my love, but you're my beloved. It sounds better to a modern English reader, and that's kind of the sense it was used in anyway. So as an adjective, this means dear or beloved. And as a noun, it can mean friend or loved one. And again, so this is an adjective here because it's for men. And it actually can mean just a form of address as well, actually, like often translated as sir. So example here is from Ælfric's colloquy, la leof, thar ich swinka. So sir, or low sir, la is low, I toil pretty much greatly, I toil greatly. And then yesa leof, it is michor yedeof. So yes, love, or sir, it is great work, essentially. So anyways, leof can be used that way as well, right? So it is a common way of addressing people. So again, he's calling my most beloved people, which I guess you could still see someone saying from a pulpit today. So then we have Mattheos se god spellara, which is Matthew the Gospeler, right? Which we would just say Matthew the Evangelist. The Gospeler makes sense, but it's just a little silly to say it that way. And maybe in poetry, I could see myself translating it that way, but here, the Evangelist makes sense. So gospel, of course, is well known in English. Actually, it means good news. It is actually a calque of Latin bona nuntiato, which is actually a calque itself from Evangelion. So if you notice here, actually, this is two G's, these gammas. In Greek, Greek has, if you have a double G, the first one is the ng sound, and then the second one's actual G. They do this in Gothic because Gothic is mostly based off Greek as far as orthography is concerned. So anyways, but it's not from a Latin evangelium, which in itself is from the Greek. It is again, as calque, and the calque is a loan translation, another word for it, or it's two words, I guess. It's a borrowed word that's translated into the borrowing language, right? You take the word and you're like, okay, like I'm not gonna say the Greek word, I'm just gonna, like evangelium right here, I'm gonna calque it like bono annunziato, tio. I cannot speak Latin right now, apparently, guys. It's late. So anyways, and this again from the Lindisfarne Gospels. This is an image of Matthew. So, and then et reliqua. So this is what he ends his Latin phrase. He repeats the Latin verse, and then he says et reliqua, which is and the rest are the remaining. I think etc. here is a good translation, as it retains the Latin. Everyone knows what etc. is, right? Which means and the remaining or and the rest as well. So it means the exact same thing. I've tried to look if there's any studies on etc. versus et reliqua, and I couldn't find anything. And so I'm not sure when et reliqua really stopped being popular. If you look up stuff with etc. in the topic, it's always going to come up with etc. stuff. It's just going to ignore your et reliqua stuff. So etc. though is generally considered to be later to be as popular in English. But anyways, again, it means the same thing. So then we have on Herodes dachum kiningus. So in the days of King Herod. Unlike in modern English, actually, kinning usually comes after the name, and I just have this little image here from, I guess it'd be the Two Towers from Peter Jackson. Hail, Theoden King, right? So you'd say King Theoden, but it's just ironic, actually, because Theoden kind of means king anyways. But but yeah, that's pretty easy to illustrate, I think. Some of this stuff easy to illustrate. Some of this stuff takes a little longer. Anyways, we got Evna tha kommen from Asdal Miranjar des Three Tungjel Witagan. So Evna is often an adverb, meaning even, evenly, likewise, exactly, only, just now, ever, so forth. It can also be used as an interjection, as it is here, actually. In such cases, it can be translated as lo or behold, maybe truly or indeed. Here, it should be noted that it is a translation of the Latin etce, which is only an interjection. So I think if you don't translate it as an interjection here, you'd be making a mistake, which, again, etce, it'd be ekka in classical Latin, but that means see or look, behold, hear, or something like that. So anyways, then we have Asdal, which is east part. This dal is where modern English deal comes from. You have Tunyel Witga, which is just the singular, which means star wise one or prophet or seer. Literally, that would be the translation. I seen Eleanor Parker actually translated as astronomer. Astrologer is what I translated as. It seems, I mean, Thorpe Leos also do astrologer. So it is synonymous with Tid Schauweiter, which is time observer, tide shower, literally. And also Tungjol, which is the more typical spelling here, an earlier spelling. Tungjol is pretty late, West Saxon. It has many cool compounds, actually. Itself, it can mean constellation, this Tungjol. It can mean star, it can mean planet, or really any heavenly object. So Tungjolkraft is astrology or astronomy. Tungjolai is astronomy, which is, again, star, law, I is law. And Tungjol Yeshad is astrology or astronomy. So, again, this is the line I put at the bottom here. What we have at the top is translated as, behold, there came from the east part of Middle Earth 3 astrologers. I think east part, and keeping it Middle Earth rather than, say, like the world, gives you this sense that this is a translation still. So I want the translation to be easy to understand. And I think saying east part is still very easy to understand. I think saying Middle Earth is very easy to understand. But it is not. I mean, it's just not modern English. You can tell, right? I mean, so some of it's going to come off as rather poetic in some sense. But you also just get a sense for a different culture. Because even though it's the ancestor of our language, it's not the same. Okay. Where is Yudishra Leoda king? So where is the king of the Jewish people? That's how I translated this. Thorpe puts this as, where is the king of the Jews? Okay. So Yudish means Jewish. Okay. And it is an adjective, but it can be a substantive, which is when an adjective stands in for a noun, by the way, and therefore can just mean Jew, right? This is plural, but so Jews. Anyways. But so either translation then works, right? But Thorpe's does leave out Leoda, which I'm trying to retain as much as this language, again, like I just talked about, as I can, so I didn't want to leave out this word, right? I might then leave someone who's not very familiar with Old English looking at my translation and being a bit more confused than I feel like they should be. So Leoda, we're going to talk about it now. So this noun actually could be a nominative singular of Leoda, or the genitive plural of Leod. Leoda means man or person, individual of a nation. In context, this would make no sense, okay? But this is just for the sake of exercise. I put it all in here. But in our needs for, but it is in our needs for agreement. It also doesn't, it doesn't work, right, for our needs of agreement, right? It just doesn't. So Leod, in the genitive, agrees with Yudeshra. And Leod itself is actually two words, right? So the first is a masculine strong I, stem noun. And then only Leoda, so in the genitive plural, because Leoda up here, of course, and actually it means, so that's where it agrees right here in our sentence we have, and it means man, prince, or leader. And again, in context, this makes no sense. So the second version of Leod, though, is a feminine strong O stem, and it can appear as Leoda in the nominative, accusative, and genitive plurals. And genitive agrees, of course, in this instance, and the word itself means people or a nation, which fits the context exactly as we need it. So, hence, people, Jewish people, or just the Jews, I guess, which is a pretty modern way of speaking. Okay, but I think Jewish people also just works, especially since that's what it says, Jewish people, right there. Anyway, so we also have an addition note here I will mention, actually, and I have my copy right here. I'm unsure of the text or the Early English Text Society, as I do not have them. I would like to get them. But in the Epiphany homily for the first series, the Thorpe and Liuza texts do not match. Thorpe is actually missing some of the scriptural portion of the homily near the start, which, if you remember from my first video, a homily is a sharing of scripture and expounding on it, pretty much. And a sermon doesn't rely on some scriptural for context or whatever, particularly. So these are homilies, right? So that first portion is important for the rest of the sermon, for the homily, right? Liuza skips it. He skips a good chunk of it, actually. So after the repetition, so you have the Latin, which is relatively short. Thorpe just repeats it in the Old English. But in reality, Ælfric actually goes much further. He extends the scriptural reading in Old English. Liuza has that, okay, right, for several more sentences. So Thorpe says, Sethe akenet is, and then etc. And then he continues with, this die is yechaten, okay? So this etc. actually cuts out the rest of the homiletic narrative, okay? I noted the difference, actually, because I was like, why would Ælfric choose etc. here, but use et reliqua above? Okay, again, so that's how I figured it out, and I'm glad I opened up Liuza, because again, I mostly am just doing this translation on my own, but I do like sometimes to compare, to see what they think it should say. Here's what I'm gonna do. So if you see this marker here, at least this is on the, I marked it over here in the Old English. This stuff at the bottom of the page is not in Thorpe's up until this marker. So you have most of this paragraph, which starts on the previous page, and then you have all of this paragraph. So you're missing a good chunk, okay? So again, while Thorpe is my main textual source, I amended it with Liuza for the video for my translation. And I mentioned that actually in the description of that. So, okay, so then we have Tironian notes, ampersands, and etc. as I want to talk about real quick. This is mostly just a codicological aside. So this made me curious because of that. On when etc. entered English, the Oxford English Dictionary puts it as 1418, which is in its first attested in Middle English. Now, it's hard to determine sometimes when they're just saying something in Latin in the middle of their English, or if they consider it part of English, right? Bremer wrote a good article on this, on the words for the cross, and all the English words for cross, and well, cross obviously comes from Latin, but those examples in Old English of the predecessor for our modern cross, whether those words are even actually Old English or if they're just straight up Latin in an Old English text or something like that. That's an aside. I don't remember the name of the article off the top of my head, but scroll. So I could not find the abbreviation, etc. When that was first attested, the abbreviation etc. period. But it became popular in the 20th century. The much more common abbreviation was ampersand C. Okay, ampersand, there it is just a Latin et. Okay, which means and in Latin. If you know French, this is a, right? But it's spelled exactly the same. And this is less obscured in some scripts, which will have examples over here. It looks, that's an ampersand. It looks like et though. And it is more obscure actually in the cross epsilon, which is also means and, but it's not so much of an at. So, but one thing you'll see common when you read an actual manuscript, there's a couple things, but at least as right now I want to mention, is you'll see Tironian notes, which is a shorthand supposedly created by a guy named Tiro, the secretary of Cicero or Cicero. In Anglo-Saxon manuscripts, the ligature for et is often used, right? Because Tironian notes is a shorthand system. There's lots of notes. This is just the one Anglo-Saxon scribes use, just the one, pretty much, to see all the time, right? And that just means and. So instead of we're seeing und or on written out, you'll see this Tironian note. It kind of looks like a 7, but instead of the bottom hitting the line, if you were to put it on a line, the bottom goes below the line, like a P would, or something like that, like a lowercase p. So there's a manuscript, actually, which is from Dunstan's class book, a homily on the inventions of cross, right here on the right. So that's a Tironian note. Kind of good. Looks kind of like so. So we'll get more into manuscripts later, either with the purification or for Candlemas next month, or with the Annunciation the month after. We'll look at a manuscript in part for part of this translating and supplementary lecture, rather than looking just at the text as is provided by someone like Leoza or Thorpe or the Early English Text Society. And so it is difficult, but it helps a little bit with the paleography. If you want to learn it, it's fun. It is difficult though. Also, the codicology is something I enjoy, and I just love looking at these medieval manuscripts. So there are ones available that cover the purification, ones that cover the enunciation, that make it pretty easy to access. So we will do that later. So what tha Herodis Kinning. So what itself, pretty famous word, actually maybe the most famous word in Old English. It is an adverb or an interjection. Often you just see it translated as low or whatever else that you could make an argument for. But so this is the common interpretation of the first word of Beowulf, right? What. Here's Beowulf down here, actually. But George Walkden actually recently challenged this and says it's more of a how, not an interjection at all. So you can read about that in the status of what in Old English. I put it here again, English Language and Linguistics from Volume 17, Issue 3, November 2013. But I translated just as low when King Herod. It works as an interjection here. I don't really see it not. So, anyways. And alla seo burgwaru. This is something I just want to mention. It means in all citizens. I had this misspelled actually in the presentation. I mispronounced it because I had it misspelled when I was reading it, and I didn't catch it for some reason when I was reading it. So I just said boot huaru, but it's burgwaru. So burg is city, town, burg, borough. Waru actually only appears as a suffix in Old English, which is actually the modern English There's a lot of ers, but as in like a New Yorker, a Londoner is actually like a London Waru type of thing. That'd be plural, but it's actually normally tested into plural. And again, it means residents or inhabitants. So citizens is a common translation. So there we go. So heitha jesam noda ala tha aulra bischopus and thas forcus bokras. So he then gathered all the chief bishops and scribes of the people. So elder bishop means elder bishop, literally. The second one I put here, chief bishop. Archbishop. This is a normal way of saying archbishop in Old English. Chief priest, I think, is how Leoza translates it. I think that's a pretty good translation. Chief bishops made sense here because, again, I don't obscure this idea of bishopas. That is in Old English, right? You're going to look at it and think, oh, that's bishop, and it is, right? You wouldn't have Jewish bishops so much, but yeah, it gets the idea across still. You have bokra, which is a booker or a scribe, literally booker, right? The absolute denotation of booker actually still means scholar or scribe in modern English, or you could still say someone's a booker. I mean, there's other booker that has a more specific meaning generally these days. This is Ezra actually from the Florence Biblioteca Medicia Lorenziana, which is actually just Codex Amiatinus, actually made in Wearmouth, Jarrow, in Northumbria and Anglo-Saxony at Bede's time, actually, and it has very few illuminations, but Ezra is one of them here. And that, you can't really see it with the size of it right now, but you actually look down at Ezra's inkwell. I assume that's inkwell. It actually has a shadow, which is really rare for art at the time. There's a shadow of the inkwell. So anyways, but Codex Amiatinus is like actually just an aside, because it's a really cool manuscript. It is like the version of the Catholic Vulgate, right? It is the Vulgate, so it's written in Latin. It's complete, if I'm remembering correctly. And when they did like their newest, I believe a while ago, but still the newest version of the Vulgate, this is the one they looked at. It's complete. You normally don't get complete Bibles. It's huge. They killed hundreds of animals to make the manuscript, the parchment. So, yeah. So very cool. Pretty old, early Anglo-Saxon stuff. Again, Bede himself could have helped work on this, which I think is just I don't know, just really cool. So anyways, so real quick. Ne art thu natis gewoon. So double negatives. Let's look at them real quick because you actually have quite a bit in this homily. So double negatives negate each other in modern English. and so you don't really see them much because that's just silly. I mean, right? But they were actually very common in Old English, and there are many in this homily. They do not negate each other, however, okay? But generally are there for a sense of emphasis. They're emphatic, right? So, so you can even get triple or more negatives. They are allowed. So you are by no means is how I translated this, because for a modern English reader, that just makes sense. But it literally is you are not at all. You are not at all, right? Not are you not at all, or if you wanted the more exact word order. And these first two could even be contracted as nart. Sometimes you'll see these negatives contracted, and we mentioned this actually in the last lecture, but they'll be contracted onto verbs. Only really popular verbs like nilon, right? Like will not or wish not, want not, whatever, right? Stuff like that. You'll see them contracted on, and it gives it a negative sense. Contracted on the front rather than the end, which is what we do in modern English. But so yeah. But again, you'll see them, and they're not like, it's not like, oh, there's 3, so it's actually negative, and there's 4. No, wait, it's positive, No, they don't negate each other. They're just Old English uses them. You can go more in depth in this, but just real quick, mostly emphatic. They don't negate each other. Of the kumste heretocha. So from you will come the leader. So hera is army or military. It's like in Herald or Walter, even actually the same name as Herald, but just the theme is switched. It's in Herald, hera it's the proto theme and the diathematic name, and in Walter it's the deutero theme and the diathematic name. Anyways, and then hocha is a leader, and actually only survives in compounds in Old English. So I think it might survive only in compounds in Germanic languages, but I need to double check that. It's generally translated as general or duke. It reminds me of the idea that Jews expected a physical savior from the Roman oppression and not a spiritual one, right? This is actually in the Vulgate, Matthew chapter 2, verse 6. The word is dux, which you would, often translate as captain or duke or whatever. So I think leader works. It's actually cognate with Old Norse Leithtogi and German Herzog. So take that as you will. Glad him beforan. So glide before them. This is talking about the star gliding before the wise men as they are looking for baby Christ and his mother Mary. Which just made me think of a slip and slide, because I think glide is an interesting verb to use here. I'm not sure if there's been studies on the verb glide, because it means exactly what it means. It means glide or slide or something like that, slip, So I thought of a slip and slide and just a star on the side. I just think it's interesting. So, anyways, Tharla blisodon, so greatly rejoiced. So blission itself, Tharla is actually what we saw earlier in the colloquy, but blission, so as intransitive, which means without a direct object, it means to rejoice or be glad. As a transitive verb, so with a direct object, it means to gladden or to make happy or to delight. So again, just a grammatical thing there. But this is actually related to bliss and blithe, from the Proto-West Germanic blith son. So should have got more water. I recorded a video for a different channel actually before this, so I'm talking too much. All right, then we have he yeopenadon heora hor fatu. So they opened their coffers. So hor fat is literally hoard that. So it's fat normally. This is I standardize it down here, hoard fat, rather than hoard fat. And ooh is of course the plural in this case. I think that's dative. No, accusative, sorry. But so this picture over here is mostly for this bottom comment. So this is the continuation of the sentence. And on him lak ye ofrudon, gold and rekels and miran. First off, I'm not exactly. This is one word I've never heard anyone say. I don't know if this is rekels or rekels. One little source I saw said rekels. That's why I say rekels. But I don't know if it's accurate, because I know some of this stuff is not. And some of these people are going to disagree anyways. So, and offered him offerings or gifts, gold and incense and myrrh. Okay, so Lock itself means gift or offering. It can also mean play or sport or game, battle, strife. Is actually the second theme, so the Deutero theme and Guthloc's name. But Reckles itself means incense pretty strictly, actually. And here it's in place of frankincense, which is just up here. You can't see it, but is Latin tus, okay, in this scripture. The Old English gloss for the same verse, Matthew 2:11. In the Lindisfarne Gospels, which is what this picture is, labels muram, so myrrh rather, as Reckles. So sometimes your Reckles is going to be frankincense, and sometimes your Reckles is going to be the myrrh. It pretty much just means an incense, right? And that kind of makes sense. We'll kind of talk about frankincense a little bit later. So on swevna, so in a dream. Swevin, a dream or vision. So related to the verb swepan, which means to sleep, but poetically it means to die. Okay, and it almost always seems to mean the latter in poetry when you're reading poetry. If someone is sleeping, they're actually just dying. So this actually gives us the archaic modern English word swevin, which will just mean a dream or a vision. Right? It really just means a dream. It doesn't really have this vision meaning so much in Old English, but they're close. Un kuvran hiua. So in the form of a dove. So a kovra is a dove or a pigeon. Modern word is culver. I've never heard anyone say in my life. And then hiua is the form or appearance, likeness, shape, character. Hue, and whence the modern word hue actually comes from. And then it's just illustration of the baptism of Jesus, the dove at the top, which is the context for this. This is a very short slide here. We have good or god kunden, which is godlike, pretty much, or divine. Divine is how most of these other translators translate it. I think godlike gives a more in-your-face meaning in some sense. I think when you use these Latin words, a lot of times they feel more liturgical because we're so used to them. But they kind of obscure some of the Englishness of them. I mean, we're English speakers, so when you're thinking of divine, you're probably not thinking of related. This di is probably related to God somehow. The Latin word for God. No, you're probably not thinking that, right? But godlike is much more straightforward, right? And that's pretty much what it is in Old English, anyhow. Because again, as we kind of covered in the first lecture, Old English has very few borrowings for this gospel stuff. So I mean, it's pretty interesting, I think. This is a similar problem I actually have with the word redeemer in modern English. When we speak of Christ or whatever as redeemer, what does redeem even mean, right? Like redeem your coupon or something like that, right? You have some sense of it, but in Middle English period, it's actually very common to call him the again buyer, which is exactly what redeemer is. We just took our Middle English term and we're just like, yeah, let's just use the Latin one now. So, which you don't, as far as I have not seen something like again buyer actually used in Old English. If it comes up, I'd be excited, but it might exist. I'm not aware of it is. So, tha Judeshan Hyrdas, Etaknodon tha Gaslikan Gaslitan Hyrdas. The Jewish shepherds prefigured the spiritual shepherds. So, prefigured, betokened, signified something. Etaknodon, again, okay, like I wrote it all there. It represents symbolically pretty much. And then Gaslich is ghostly, spiritual, or holy, or sacred. It's literally ghostly. We don't really have that sense of ghostly in modern English. Oh, that's ghostly. We're not going to think it's spiritual. We're just going to think it's spooky or something. So, but this is sense. So spiritual, I think, is probably the closest translation we can get to that. But then we have Sothricha Sesam Shilp Achorat. So truly the psalm is composed. So a psalm shaper is literally what this is. Psalm shape or poet. A shop in other dialects is a pretty common word for a poet. Likely the people that would like bards pretty much with this idea that people sitting there reciting these epics or whatnot. So psalm is also attested as psalm with the P in Old English, but the initial P is never said, but is actually there etymologically because of Latin psalms. So this is actually a reconstruction of the Sun Who harp over here on the right, though. Often called an Anglo-Saxon harp because I think the first attestations we have of them are in Anglo-Saxon England or from Anglo-Saxon England, but I think it's later been that they're actually pretty common in the Germanic world. they themselves evolving from earlier stuff from other parts of the world. But anyways, you can buy stuff like this. They're not cheap though. Okay, Twain Wallace. So 2 walls. That's what it looks like. Old English actually has many declensions for the word two. Twain. This is literally twain, is what it looks like. Twain walls. So which we don't really use much in modern English. So anyways, so the masculine nominative of two is twain. Feminine nominative is toi. Okay, and the neuter nominative is tu, poetry, or toi in prose. So it's interesting. So because obviously our modern spelling of two looks much more like this toi, sounds much more like this two. So, and I guess, like I said, we have twain still. But okay, so Tokima and Advent. So, and Advent, I should say, sorry. So Tokima means coming or Advent, arrival, approach. It literally is to come, or the to coming, a calque of the Latin Adventus, and here's just an Advent hymn. Hey, on Sibatham ye or the ye hinda waron. On peace to those who were at hand. So Sib is a word, is an interesting one. Because it means two things that are a little different. I'd say that it means relationship or peace. So relationship is actually at the bottom here. It says also related to the modern sibling. You can see that, right? So it comes from Proto-Germanic sibial, related to Proto-Germanic swebas, one's own people, pretty much implied people here, one's own. Whence the swebi, hence why we have this picture of the Osterby head, showing the swebi and not a type of hairstyle used by the swebi, or Germanic people that have a different history than Anglo-Saxons, but still, the hair is very well preserved. I think this was found in a bog. If my hair grows long enough, I'll probably use that. Anyways, so yeah, I still think it's interesting though that the Sib has this idea of peace, has this idea of relationship. I believe in Proto-Germanic, I don't believe it has this idea of peace. I need to look that back up, but I don't believe it does. Okay, so words of note. Since this will take too long, if I take too long and all this stuff, I'm just going to look at some words that I found stood out. I think they're interesting to at least look at. They feel poetic. Old English has this very poetic sense, and Ælfric does a good job of it, of keeping that poetry up front. So on Nisa is oneness, literally on Nisa, oneness. Then we have Kitha, which is knowledge, and we have Unkitha, which is ignorance. So it's actually related to the modern word kith. You can look that one up and figure that one out. Fiendship is fiendship as opposed to friendship. Friend and fiend are not related, but they look really similar in Old English, and so they're often used together. Friend is not here, but it's a more clear meaning would be hostility, of course. And then angenga, so loner. This is a ge rather than a ying. Yinga, it's not angenga. Angenga, loner, a lone goer, literally one goer or traveler. So a lone goer, a lone traveler, or something that is solitary. Actually, if you want to read more on this one, again, it does seem poetic. You can find it in something like Beowulf. One of I don't know if she's made more than one, but there is a homily post on this sermon, on this homily that Eleanor Parker has made. I'll try to remember to link this below, actually, where she goes more in depth and looks at Angenga and kind of gives like a little what's the word? Wow, I'm tired. Okay, I don't remember. She goes over this one a little bit more. We have Seldkuth, which means weird, that's one way to translate it. Strange. I think strange works a little better. It is literally seldom known though. Right? Looks like seldom kuth to know sometimes. There's lots of verbs meaning to know, and I haven't really talked about that yet. But then we also have afardon, which is afeared, literally, if you put it in modern English, but it means to terrify or to make afraid. We should have kept this word. I think it works very well. Anyways, we got buton toyon, so without a doubt. So toyon is not to be confused with toyen. Okay, it doesn't mean two; it means doubt. Is actually once we get the rare noun of tweenlight, which is not a shortening of between light, is just synonymous with twilight. This doubt light kind of uncertain light. So from Proto-Germanic twicho, from Proto-Indo-European, duiko, from this root of duo. This is the one, number one, not two or three. I don't know how to say those. I don't know if anyone does really. The root gives us though. This root, this Proto-Indo-European root, gives us words like twin and twig as well. So, fra middag och non. So this one again is just kind of more of a cultural thing to kind of know. So we have from midday as far as the ninth hour is what that is translated as in my translation. So known is modern English knowness, though this knowness is borrowed again later through Latin. But it was from this Old English known is where we get noon. Okay, but this would actually really be the medieval ninth hour reckoning, so it would be about 3 o'clock and not 12 o'clock, which we think about it these days. So this is from Lioza. This is a note. He has some notes for each homily at the end of the book. It says, ancient and medieval people divided the day into two unequal portions, one of daylight and one of darkness, each subdivided into 12 hours. In the summer, the daylight hours were long and the night hours short. So an hour is not quite what we're thinking of here, or what you would think of as 60 minutes. In winter, vice versa. The first hour of the day was sunrise, the 12th sunset. The ninth hour is the middle of the afternoon, usually around 3 p.m. So again, usually because they're not set like 60 minutes like we think of. So I have, this is from Wikipedia, but this is, you get to see them, vigil, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sex, notice, vespers, compline, which are still followed. So his arista. So arist is a rising up or a resurrection, right? His arising, literally. So I like this verb in Gothic, eurais, because the pro drop and just Gothic is more archaic. So you actually get the whole sense of he is risen in eurais. So if you want to have an Easter theme, Gothic verb or just one word, eurais, as Gothic characters, of course, but eurais. So Haflingus unthankus forlet. So lost its captives against its will, or literally captives unthink lost. So unthinkfully kind of. So this is talking about hell losing its captives. He was Heora Lateo. So it was their guide. Okay. I just want to look at Lateo here. So Lateo, more standardized of Ladteo. They're just assimilated to two T's. This D assimilated to the other T. Then you have Lad Theo, which is funny because that means this thorn assimilated to the D to become a plosive stop rather than this fricative. And then the D assimilated to the T that had assimilated to the D to become Lateo. So anyways, just interesting. But it means a leading servant, or Theo is a slave often. So leading a slave, but servant is another good translation for it. So literally a leader, a guide, general, I think it's in some contexts. So anyways, was their leader or their guide? Leader sounds a little weird in modern English, so guide, a general doesn't make any sense here really. So we have weird and fate. So actually Ælfric goes on a whole section of this homily talking about fate. So weird, when it's the modern English weird, is events or occurrences. And I would say it's probably that more strictly than anything else. It's more of what happens rather than fate or destiny, right? There's this sense of Germanic fatalism that is kind of hard, right, to discuss, right? Because it's hard to know what they mean exactly. Kind of the fun of this, philological exercise. But I almost always translate it as destiny here. I think, except for the first time it shows up, I think it works as occurrences. Even though Ælfric is making the argument against destiny. I don't know. I think it's kind of ironic. But so this goes into the argument that seems to go against the idea of predestination. And Lioza says this is based in Augustine, but is largely Ælfric's own invention. Again, from his notes at the end. He cites a book by Lynn Grundy, Books in Grace by Ælfric's Theology. I have not read this, but it'd be an interesting, looks like probably a chapter in that book I would like to read. So some more words of note. We have thou, which is habit or custom. which in plural it can mean like customs, virtue, conduct, character. Once we get the modern English word thew, actually, which has a meaning related to physical strength. So I have Conan down here. I don't know Schwarzenegger. So if you see it in modern English, which you're not going to see it in modern English much, it's going to have this like might and main like physical virtue, strength type of thing idea going on. That doesn't have that meaning in Old English. So Quen can mean queen, princess, or woman, which should be unsurprising if you know some Germanic cognates. But when's modern English queen? There also when's modern English queen with A with this second E, but it's also what I put in the translation as queen, not rather than woman or whatever. I think in context because it's in comparison with the slave. And speaking of slave, we have wiln, which is handmaid, which is a contraction of wiolin, which is wach, slave, or Welsh. This is where we get the word Welsh, actually. And then this en suffix, which is just a feminine suffix, like chicken, kind of. Well, that's just more of a diminutive, but yeah, similar thing. So then we have kinsettle, which is the royal seat, or the throne, really. The last word is actually in the compound here is once we get the modern word settle, which I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say, but it's a bench with a backrest, pretty much what the modern meaning is. Then we have this Beowulf line 6, of course. Monachum maithum meod setlo of tach. So many peoples right there. Mead benches meod setla, mead settles, took away or deprived. That's the Lytotes. I think Michael Drow would tell you it's the Lytotes. Understatement. The Heruli were not treated very nice. Anyways, continued. So we have Theochte, which is slavery or thraldom. Again, Theo, is servant or slave. Ta just makes it. Wow, I can't think. More of abstract. Now, anyways, and then we have stunt, which is exactly the same in modern English. It's stupid or foolish, or it can be mean an idiot or a fool as well. And I have Evel Knievel's Snake River Canyon jump here. I live in Idaho, so I guess that's something Idaho's good for. And then we have idela, which is idle, where we get the word idle. And then but it can often means empty. I think empty would maybe be like my default for it. But it can mean lazy or worthless too, like it does today. We have adwashan, which means quench. Adwashan. It's quench or extinguish, modern dush. And then we have dadlicha, which is deadly or mortal, and then as opposed to undadlicha, which is immortal. So I have ayanakira. So this is literally own choice. That is almost always how I translated it. That's almost always how Yoza translates it. Almost always how Thorpe translates it. In context, it's obviously talking about this idea of free will or agency. Okay, this again seems to be against the idea of predestination. So we have forestikta, which is modern sight or stite. Sorry, for means before. Here, it's not a bad or a negative for, or completely, whatever. We get some for sometimes. That means, and here forestikta means foreordained or predestined. So. But he foreordained no one to evilness, for he himself is all goodness, nor did he foreordain anyone to destruction, for he is true life. He foreordained the chosen for eternal life, because he knew they would be like that by his grace and by their own obedience. So that's I didn't put the whole Old English in here. So he's using this word a lot, or these two words, I guess. And it's interesting. It's an interesting I guess, debate on it. Again, the word I'm looking for that I was looking for earlier is not coming to mind. I am tired. Sorry. Anyways, mild-heartedness and redemption. This is mild. Heartness means mild heartness, right? It means sorry. It's mild-heartedness and redemption. Sorry, mild-heartedness means mercy, literally though. We also have this word alcida, which comes up around the same time. So the past participle of ariasan, which means to free or rescue, release, or to redeem at fault, or to detach. This will get into another name of Jesus that predates our modern from the Latin Redeemer. I kind of mentioned earlier. We'll see this in the next homily though, because we don't actually see this name as Redeemer. We just see the verb here. So then more words of note. We have lenden, which means a loin. modern English lend. We have sali, which is happy. That's the best way to translate it here, I'd say. But it gives us modern English silly, actually, and the Scots word seely, which you'll see in some like fairy tale stuff, like unseelie or whatever. You have wena, which is an idea or a thought, supposition, imagination. You have fareld, which is journey or course. It can actually mean Passover sometimes, which is interesting, but not here. Anyways, and you have unfundinisa, so invention, discovery, experience, literally is out of findingness. They have yeloma, which is frequently or often. It's related to lame in some sense. I will not get into that etymology right now, though. Continued, though, we have ye even lach, yeah, which means to imitate, copy, or match. Even plus lakan, which this lakan is actually where we get ledge, as in knowledge, or freeledge, which I never heard anyone say. But then we have ilder, which is elder, ancestor, or parent. I believe in the context of the homily, I believe I translate it as parent. Then we have wirya, which is curse. And we have rixian, which is to rule, reign, or govern. And they're related to richa, as in like a kingdom. As a potential modern version would be rixin, if you just want to use it, I guess. So I like doing stuff like that. Take a word that I don't believe has actually been attested in modern English. Lastly, attested in Middle English. But anyhow, they have yesifnis, which is constitution or appointment, or law or ceremony, religion, positions, or foundation. So uton, is this a defective verb? So let us is probably the best way of translating this. Let us, or let's rather, right? Just contract it. So this is a form of witan, it seems. So an infinitive actually usually comes right after it, rather than at the end of the sentence, which is normal as Old English syntax is concerned. And it's always initial, right? It's never final in a clause. And it's always utan ne and not ne uton. So again, just some interesting things about this one. And about how it might be a survival of this version of witan that normally is lost in Old English. Again, there's more stuff we can get into here, but I think that covers the bases, at least for now. Store yibirath to goddess de nunga. So frankincense belongs to God's service. Instead of rekels, we now have store. Okay, so we had rekels earlier in place of frankincense, because this comes after the gold and before myrrh. And this comes from the Latin storax, which is a resin from the with antibacterial properties taken from the bark of the liquid downbar orientalis, or the liquid downbar styracifua. I'm sure he's sorry. I just should not have read that. But frankincense itself, wow. Comes from Old French franc encens, which is noble incense, which is obtained from the Boswellia thurifera tree if you want true incense. But, and then we have a depiction of the Adoration Magi, the Eastern depiction. So that, though, you can see though that we have this Old French influence, which English doesn't get a lot of Old French really until Middle English, particularly in the period about the 150 years right after John loses Normandy. That's really when we get like all our Old French borrowings. And if frankincense just means noble incense, rekels works just fine then, because it literally means the same thing pretty much. So, and I guess we're not going to put Boswellia thurifera incense in our scriptures. So, anyways, a wirni yendlich gold hoard lithon thas witan mutha. A desirable hoard lies in the wise man's mouth. That's how I translate it, at least. So gold hoard, literally, as you can tell, is, I put hoard, right? It's a gold hoard with just an A in modern English here. Leoza puts treasure, which I felt too small to me personally. And Thorpe puts gold treasure, which I felt was too awkward for modern English. So I just put hoard. So maybe best translated as treasure or treasury, again, or hoard. So depending on context. Drichten, si min yibad ascend. So Lord, let my prayer be sent. So yibed is related to beda, or bead, modern English, the venerable, right? As well as the word bead, right? So we have another, again, an Eastern depiction of bead here. But also bead. So the word bead just means prayer. That's all it means. Which is a really cool name, I think, honestly. But most Germanic names tend to be diathematic, but not all of them, obviously. So Bede is an example. Very well respected Old English scholar, historian, saint, and interesting. I think it's really cool. His name is Bede, and then we get to see it here. Yebid. It's just a version of that prayer. So, and then you get some modern rosary here. Yet more words. So we got quelnum barnis, which is death-bearingness. So quelnum is death, and see modern word qualm actually. We have uplichan, which is celestial, on high, or sublime, or heavenly. We have Heelwood, which is altars, really. So that's how it's translated here in the homily. Weilch beod is what it is. It's a contraction. Weilwood. This first part of the compound just means idol, actually, in Old English, and is related to the German Weihnachten, which is the German word for Christmas, actually. So just holy night. And then Gothic, Vase, sorry, which just means holy, or Veja, which is priest. So this doesn't survive in modern English. I believe High German and Gothic are the only ones, and considering no one speaks Gothic, it's just High German these days. So, anyways, Onelath is kindle or ignite, and then we have What Wugu, so what thing, what thing, literally what Wuhu. An adverb, as an adverb rather, it means somewhat. As a pronoun, it means something. And then we have continued some words of note. We have winsomliche, which is winsomely, literally winsomely in modern English, or pleasantly or sweetly would probably be a more appropriate modern translation. We have stinka, which is to give off a smell. Not necessarily negative, okay, but we tend to think along these lines in modern English, right? If you have, oh, there's a smell, something stinks, there's an odor, right? We tend to think that they're all negative, even though there's actually nothing inherently negative about the words. Some linguists would call them like potty words, right? And so they just tend to have this negative connotation. So, anyways, we have galvanis, which is lust or wantonness. We have nitten, which is an animal, right? This is actually where we get the modern English word neat. In modern English, this would be a bull or a cow or just cattle collectively, but here in Old English, it doesn't necessarily mean cattle. It just means the animals or beasts. We have milks, which is an interesting looking word. It means dung or excrement. We have rotian, which is to rot, and we have also forrotian, which is to fully rot. So we also have some double meanings, and I think for me at least, this comes up. I think the closing of this homily is very powerful. On its own, even without these double meanings. Well, in part, actually, let's talk about it. So the closing thoughts of Ælfric, again, very powerful. In part, we have the word ard, which means country or land, etc. We also, it more specifically can mean homeland, and sometimes it even has the meaning of fate. There's some other definitions you could find for it. I think the latter here gives us closer to what the original has, rather than just country. In latter, I mostly mean homeland here. There's extra meanings, right? I believe Thorpe and Leoza both just translated as country, which is such a lame way to translate it. Just, like, you're really lacking on it there. Like, it just loses so much of its meaning, I think. But I think this idea, like, the medieval people loved double meanings, right? And so this idea of it's a homeland, it's our fate, okay? We're going to return to our homeland. It is our fate, in a sense, to return to it. We're going to return to our fate, right? But homeland, probably the best translation for it. But again, it's best just to read this stuff in the original, which is why philology is cool. But anyways, so I think these double meanings, though, again, medieval people love them. They can be subtle, poetic, powerful. And sometimes they give you an insight into the mind. At least that was the thought for the medieval person. Such as the idea that sun, and sunu, sun, right? Differences sun for sun, and sunu is son in modern English. Still sound the same in modern English. Actually, they sound more alike in modern English than they did in Old English. And that is not an accident to an Anglo-Saxon or medieval person in general. So then we have this idea, though. What is our homeland? What is this art? It's not our country. No, it's Nerksnawang. Okay, that is paradise. Okay, actually, if you read some of Ælfric's stuff from like the Hexateuch, you'll like. I'm remembering. I think his Garden of Eden, which is funny actually, anyways, because they don't make aprons for themselves; they make breeches themselves. But anyways, he'll use the word paradisum sometimes, which is taken straight from Latin, obviously. But he also used Nerksnawang or other inflections of it. And it just means paradise. That's probably the best way to translate it. So again, this is another example of using retaining this word that almost certainly had a meaning before, right? Just like Yule, we went over in a separate video I made. Yule or midwinter, right? That they almost certainly were used pre-conversion. So Neokshnawang is something that survives essentially from this. And its etymology is uncertain, actually, though. I've never read anything that's super convincing. Wang is very actually easy. It just means plain or field. But Neoksna, that's the more difficult part. So this last word actually in and of itself means paradise in Gothic, which you have Wangs here. Again, remember I mentioned Evangelion at the beginning with Greek. This is an example of the Gothic using the same thing. These are both G Gothic here, but this first one is ing because it comes before the second one. The double G, the first one's ing, the second one is a g. So almost always, not always, but almost always in Gothic. And then you actually have this more famous scripture, of course, which does survive in Gothic, so I have it here. Thati furulwans warth ino wang ya harsitha on quith ya waruda. Thoi ni skurda sind man rodian. That is Gothic again. It's not Old English. It's related though. That sounds similar. So that he was taken away into paradise and heard unquethable words, unspeakable, unutterable, unsayable. I just wanted to note the cognate there, unquethable, which really only survives in Quoth past. Which I must have cut it off actually. I wonder which. Wow. Okay. So that's where it does. So I actually did translate the whole thing, but which man must not speak, I believe. I don't think there's a cognate for this in Old English. So this is my translation as well. Okay, so some closing words. A little, just very little left to go. I'm almost there. We're almost there. We are almost there. So, anyways, so we have bich leova, which is food, essentially. Then you have thiena. There's a few versions of this verb, but it just means to eat or taste or partake of food. Then you have forluran, which just means lost. It's literally forlorn, right? With this rhoticism or lack of rhoticism going on between lost and lorn. They have mode, which is, as a word itself is actually, maybe some would say it's difficult to translate because it actually has several meanings. The three common ways to translate it, because it has three meanings that are kind of hard to, in context, they're so easy to say, like you translate as either one of them, right, or any of them. So mind can be mind, it can be heart, it could be spirit. Then something like Cadman's hymn, it's modia thunk, which means mind thoughts. Right? I think mind is probably the best translation there because it's attached to yathunk, right, which is thoughts. So heart thoughts, I don't know. Many people think they thought that with their heart. I don't think so. Probably not with their spirit either. Maybe. So context there would maybe help a little, but it is notoriously kind of a doozy. And here are the final actual closing words. I'm surprised I was able to keep this as short as I was. This is almost double the length of the of the other one, of the slides for the preface. And this is like almost triple the length, the homily itself in the preface. So the last words for amen are un aura worlda world. So the world of all worlds, world without it, right? Or forever and ever, right, is pretty much how I I believe I put it in there as forever and ever. So, world has had many meanings, right? It means world, existence, earthly things, humans, and things upon the earth. It can mean like an age, and it means a person's lifetime. It can mean the course of human affairs. It comes from this Proto-Germanic word actually, which is weraldis, which is weras, which again I think we've gone over before, but it means man. That's where we get Old English were, as in like a werewolf. And then aldis, which is age, or eld is modern English, eld, but that's not a common word. And so it actually has its original meaning of like this place of man, kind of, or this time of man. Well, it's rather, it has more of this meaning of time of man, and then later it gets more of the meaning of place of man. And so I just wanted to, this pale blue dot picture, rather famous from Voyager 1, I think from 1990, where it shows Earth, as Sagan, I think, would say, a mote of dust hanging in a sunbeam or whatever, something like that. And you just get to see this idea of this un aura world, right? The world of all worlds, right? Or world without end, right? And that, I think this picture, in some sense, at least for me, puts it in perspective, right? Because you have this idea of just how big our world is, and then you can, like, one of the furthest pictures, maybe the furthest picture we have of Earth taken away, and just look how small it is in creation. That's pretty inspiring to me. So, anyways, I'm Liam. I'm Liam QD Hall, actually, is how I publish things, but online I don't just go by Liam. Just call me Liam. And that is the supplementary lecture 2 for the Epiphany. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. Maybe I'll remember that word I was looking for. And hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I definitely enjoyed it, and I learned something when I went through and made these slides. So we'll see if they shorten as I get more familiar with the language, and as potentially we together get more familiar with it as we go through. And so there's some words we're not going to have to cover again, right? So anyways, I do appreciate anyone who has watched anything or listened to anything, and who will do so later as well. So again, Liam, thank you. I will catch you probably next with Purification on Candlemas, which is, what is that? That's February 2nd, I think.